people would think, oh, all we do is make stickers. What's the big deal? The big deal is a $200 million airplane could potentially be sitting on the tarmac waiting because that it doesn't have that sticker. So at the end, when they sell an airplane, the FAA does a final walkthrough on that airplane, and they will not approve the airplane to fly away until it has everything that it needs to have on this FAA checklist.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Have you heard the news where a large aerospace manufacturer won a large contract for several planes? While it's exciting news for them, it could be equally challenging for suppliers who are part of that ecosystem and asked to staff overnight to meet the demand of their key customer. Or you run the risk of losing the relationship. In addition, the quality requirements and stringent processes make it even harder for these suppliers. In today's episode, we have a guest, Mark Evans, who discusses the manufacturing and engineering processes of a Boeing supplier. He also discusses how to manage the expectations of large customers, where your key customer may have thousands of suppliers in their ecosystem. Finally, he discusses key nuances and processes of the aerospace manufacturing industry and how it is different from other industries. Let me introduce Mark to you. Mark Evans has 25 years of experience in aerospace manufacturing and currently the Chief Manufacturing Officer with Zemelgo. While in the Boeing ecosystem, he was the recipient of Performance Excellence Awards from Boeing 11 times. Under his leadership, his company also received the Supplier of the Year award from Boeing 3 times. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi Sam, thanks for having me.
Of course, my pleasure. Just to kick things off, do you want to start with your personal story and current focus, Mark?
Sure. So I'm just going to go all the way back to when I was a kid. So I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and a big deal back then was NASA, and math and science was a focus of everyone. And my dad was a heat transfer engineer for gas turbine engines. So he used to take us to the airport and we'd watch the planes go screaming overhead, and it was really great. And every Saturday he would take us to the Aerospace Museum. So that's kind of how I got my passion for the aerospace industry. And so I started working in graphic arts, and I did a lot of printing type stuff. And I did printing of T-shirts to start with, and paper products and things like that. And I kind of like migrated from company to company, and I ended up at a company that was had just taken over the contract for the printing for Boeing. Boeing used to do it in-house, and then they subbed it out to the company I was working for at the time. And I got hired as a printer. And over the years, I worked my way up to a lead printer, and then a supervisor, and then the production manager of the printing process at this company. And so that's kind of my path for how I got into the aerospace industry. And so basically through printing.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's quite a background. Starting from printing, you were printing the T-shirts, and now you are printing the airplanes, which is amazing. So now we have one of the standard questions that we ask every single guest that actually come on the show. We are going to dig deeper into your background, but the standard question is going to be your perspective on business growth, Mark.
Okay, for me, it starts with yourself. And so I have this thing that I always do, DLLL, daily lifelong learning.
Yeah.
So I'm always working to learn and improve myself every single day. So whatever business I'm in, I'm finding out all the different aspects of that business, trying to learn the technical terms, watching videos, listening to podcasts,
Yeah.
reading extensively, of course. And I think it all starts with improving yourself, and therefore you can take those learnings and apply them to whatever situation you're in.
Yeah, could not agree more. If you are in the operations role, definitely you need to be always learning. And definitely in case of manufacturing, things are changing all the time. So the more you learn, the better you are going to be at your job. And obviously, once the employees are better, then company is going to do well as well. So let's dig into your background. And I always like to connect the dots, right? So you have two very significant background in your career. One is the printing, which is, in my opinion, dramatically different industry from aerospace, right? Because the quality requirement, the manufacturing processes, the engineering processes that you are going to have in case of your aerospace manufacturing is going to be completely different. So would you like to talk about some of the similarities that you have seen in these two industries and maybe talk about the differences as well? If you have any specific stories, maybe when you started in the aerospace, when you were spending time on the printing or vice versa, if you want to share those stories, I would love to hear those.
Sure. So, as far as screen printing,
Yeah.
printing is basically printing. It's a 1,000-year-old art
Yeah.
from China, silk screening. Today's done with neoprene screens, but basically it's the same process.
Yeah.
You're driving ink through the screens to a substrate, and the process is basically the same. There's machines that help you do it. So the printing process, once you know that for one industry, it's very applicable to other industries. It's mostly just the different types of mediums that you're printing on.
Yeah.
But the difference, like you mentioned, is that in the aerospace industry, there's, of course, a lot of strict guidelines around how business shall be done and
Yeah.
be done by you write down exactly what you're going to do and you follow what you're going to do. And that's the difference between, the aerospace industry. It has very strict guidelines to it.
Right. So great points there. And I am curious right now. I know that you did mention that in case of aerospace, some sort of printing is going to be involved, and that's how you got into this career just because you had that printing background. But I am still not sure how printing is going to be relevant in case of your aerospace manufacturing environment. What exactly are you printing? Which surfaces are you trying to utilize there? How that is used in the end product? Can you describe the entire process from the aerospace perspective, how printing is relevant there?
Yeah. So what they were doing was the printing was, when you get on an airplane and it says aisle 27, see A, B,
Yeah.
and C,
Yeah.
and then the fire extinguisher is here and the oxygen mask is there. So all those little things on the airplane, and it says raise the tray during taxi, takeoff, and landing, and fasten the curtain.
Yeah.
And so every little sign in every Boeing airplane for every airline in the entire world, that's what we printed. All those little signs.
Okay, interesting. So now I have much better sense of what you are printing because the listeners may be confused. So now we know that you are printing the signs for the aerospace. So now let's talk about some of these guidelines. So why are these guidelines so important when you are simply printing an instruction for the passengers? So why do you need to write them down? Why do you need to pay so much attention on the design? And why is it so different from printing a t-shirt in a printing company than printing for an aerospace supplier company?
Okay, so in all aerospace processes,
Yeah.
like we talked about, there's very established rules and instructions, and whether you're making a bolt or an engine part, the guidelines are the same. You have to name your processes. You have to follow your processes. You have to document your processes, and whether it's printing or machining, those guidelines remain the same. So basically, you just have to say say what you're doing and do what you
Yeah.
say.
So let's take this story one level deeper, right? So let's say if I have printed t-shirts my whole life and all of a sudden I am trying to work in the aerospace environment. So you did mention that, you have to document the rules. So give me an example of the rule that you are trying to document. Are you trying to document the font size? Are you trying to document, okay, how the process is going to change from one step to the next? How are you documenting? Did you have access to any specific tools that are used in the aerospace industry? So can you take the story one level deeper? And let's say if I am walking down the aerospace facility at the supplier level, what am I going to experience since I don't have any experience with the aerospace facility because I used to print the t-shirts in my past?
Okay, so the t-shirt is going to have art or a design to it,
Yeah.
and basically the only specifications will be, you print in when you do screen printing, you do one color by one color, they're layered on top of each other, and the same with the aerospace. But it's basically you take the art and the art specifies this color will be on this layer and this color will be on that layer, and you generally try and get them aligned and looking good, obviously, and trying to get the best quality. But other than that, you're just free to make the product as you will. In the aerospace industry, everything is written down for you. There's a Boeing supplies a marker, and then
Okay.
that's your guide that you follow. And it says the font will be this,
Okay.
the character size will be that, the edge cutout will be this, the round corners will be this radius, and it will have this adhesive on it, and the substrate will be this thick. Everything is specified. The colors will be this, and it's very strict what you do. You make the exact thing that the marker says for you to make. And so you start out with the art. The art is a film
Yeah.
that's clear and black, and the film represents the image that you're going to print. And the art is created, on a computer
Yeah.
and output onto a film outputting machine. And that art is used to shoot the silk screens. When the silk screens are exposed to light and the film, then the characters wash out of the screen, and then that is how the ink can travel from the screen onto the substrate. And then the colors are spelled out exactly what they are. They're predetermined by Boeing. They have a list of colors that they always use, and
Yeah.
the colors, the printer will print the initial color, and then they'll get a computer readout to check if that color is on, and there'll be a photospectrometer that will check the color
Yeah.
and make sure it is correct, and then that has to be signed for, and then the print is compared to the marker page, and to make sure that it says what it's supposed to say, the characters
Yeah.
are spaced how they're supposed to be spaced, the material is the correct material, and then the rest of the job is printed. And when the job is printed, it's baked in an oven for 30 minutes to dry the inks.
Yeah.
And then the materials and the ticket travel to the next area, which is a fabrication process,
Yeah.
and they add adhesive to the back, which is specified, of course, on the marker. And then the substrate is cut out by a die that's arranged already in the shape of the part, and the parts are died out into individual parts. They come on sheet form with maybe 10 to a sheet, and then the die will cut them out into the individual parts, and then they shear them into strips so that they're easy to apply to the airplane for the installers. And then it goes to a QC process, and the QC process does documentation and first articles and things like this to make sure that the part manufactured is to the specifications that were called out on the marker. So that's basically the process that we followed.
Okay, amazing. So obviously, as you can see, there are a lot of moving parts in this particular process. And when you are working for somebody like Boeing and you don't have a million customers there, I'm pretty sure you would probably have just one or two. And that's the challenge that you have of the aerospace industry. And when you have that kind of power from the customer's perspective, they are going to be fairly authoritative in their position how they are going to treat their supplier. So I don't know in this particular case if you had sort of the strategic relationship with them. In my experience, when I work with any of the aerospace suppliers, the supplier relationship is going to be fairly commoditized, where they are not going to care as much for the supplier. So maybe you can share your experience, how your experience has been working with Boeing. Did you feel very welcome working with them and working in this situation? And maybe you can talk about some of the failures because you had a lot of different moving parts. And I can almost guarantee that you had some sort of failures in between, unless you had completely automated process where you had no chances of failure because you have so many manual interventions in the process. So you must have a lot of stories of failure. So do you want to share any of those stories and share your experience working with a large vendor like Boeing?
Okay, so Boeing, I'm sure, as everybody knows, is a very demanding supplier. They will come and audit you once or twice a year, and they make sure you're adhering to all the processes, and they also want to make sure that you as a supplier can ramp up with them when they ramp up. And sometimes you hear in the news that they're going to 42 jets a month for 737, up from 38 or whatever. And they want to make sure that when they do that ramp up, that you can handle it. And so they check every aspect of your business. What is your hiring? How fast does it take you to train people? How fast can you ramp up when you need to? Do you have extra capacity? What percentage of the time do you do overtime? They're checking all these things to make sure that you can keep up with them. And they don't obviously want to be in a situation where your particular part of it is what slows them down, because the jet is so expensive that you can't have a $200 million jet waiting on a $20 sticker or whatever. So this is very, very important. They used to really bring this home to us when we were working there. Is people would think, oh, all we do is make stickers. What's the big deal? The big deal is, like I said, a $200 million airplane could potentially be sitting on the tarmac waiting because that it doesn't have that sticker. So at the end, when they sell an airplane, the FAA does a final walkthrough on that airplane, and they will not approve the airplane to fly away until it has everything that it needs to have on this FAA checklist. And it would quite often come down to they would order that, okay, everything's fine except for it needs one sticker here that says you will not leave this door open during taxi, takeoff, and landing, or something like that. And so then Boeing would call us, in emergency and say, you got to make this thing right now. This would happen all the time. So there's all these fire drills where we had to be pretty much the last part on the plane. So it ended up these stickers were a very big deal towards the end of the process here.
Yeah, so interesting story there. And I'm really interested in knowing some of the stories of these fire drills where you really struggled. And again, based on the way you are describing majority of the suppliers that you are going to have. And again, if you are in the sticker business, I don't know how large your business is going to be, but for the most part, when you have a customer like Boeing who is demanding that, I need your hiring to be up overnight. But in your case, and I don't know how your margins work, unless you have margins of, let's say, 50, 60%, whatever, you can probably afford to pay people over time because you have a lot of different moving pieces overall from the hiring perspective, from management of your inventory to make sure that the quality processes that you are following at the manufacturing floor is compliant as well. So how did you ensure that your relationship with Boeing was intact all the time without any failures? Do you want to share some of the key strategies that you implemented And because of that, you were successful in your role there, or key processes, key methods, or maybe just share some stories about the failure and what you had to do to fix them.
Okay, I have a good story of engagement with Boeing. This is probably a mistake that a lot of suppliers make. Is
Yeah.
Boeing is a very demanding supplier, but they're also very generous with if you reach out to them and ask for help, they will come and help you. And what I mean by that is
Yeah.
we always proactively interacted with them, and we asked for help with doing kaizens and
Yeah.
learning lean from them. And so they would provide us with people from their company that did lean and kaizen inside Boeing, and they would come to our facility and do a week-long event with us. That's a really good thing to do because you're being proactive and you're reaching out and you're saying, I need help with this. And I think this really Boeing was really appreciative that a supplier would reach out to them and ask for help, and we would do these and make these improvements. And that's what they're looking for, is to make improvements that are to the benefit of both parties,
Yeah.
to the business and to Boeing, because Boeing is always wanting to drive down the costs for suppliers. And the only way to do that is you have to get constantly better.
Yeah.
And so this is the way to do it, is with lean and kaizen. You gotta do more with less all the time. And if you proactively reach out to them for help on this, they will give it.
Interesting. So that's a very interesting situation. And I have personally been in a lot of large ecosystems as well. And obviously, if you are able to collaborate with your customer, that's always the ideal place. But at the end of the day, you are also in the competitive situation because they are working with the other suppliers. So I can almost guarantee that you don't want to reveal everything that you might have, because everybody is going to have their own trade secrets. So in your case, did collaboration fail on you at any point of time when you shared too much information and then it sort of fired back? Do you have any stories around that by any chance? Or maybe you have a story where you could have been benefited if you actually reached out to them early. Do you have any stories there by any chance?
I would say we are always good about being proactive and reaching out early, but I would also say that the people that Boeing gave us to work with were very respectful about. We were able to share with them, and yeah, it didn't get too far into the. I mean, they were respectful about not going beyond the boundaries of what's personal to the business or whatever.
Okay, so let's talk about the audit process. So, as they are doing a very drill down in case of an audit, right? I mean, they probably want to verify everything. I don't know how much time they spend in your facility, but they are probably talking to everybody in the organization, and they are probably going to discover whatever you might not want to reveal, or just because that could be your trade secrets, right? So,
Right.
when you went through this audit process, did it fail at any point of time, or did you always pass? If you always passed, then what did you do to make sure that you are not going to fail the audit?
The audit is very multifaceted.
Yeah.
It's the more you do it, of course, the better you get at it. It does have a structure to it. They're going to look at your business health overall.
Yeah.
They're going to look at your processes. They're going to look at your maintenance and your management
Yeah.
and quality, and yeah, so those things mainly. And the audit process would last about a week.
Yeah.
They'd send about three to five people in for the audit, and these are people that go around and do these supplier audits with all. I believe Boeing has like 10,000 suppliers. It's really crazy.
Yeah.
So they go and do this all year, I assume, and spend a week or a few days, with each supplier to find out all these things. And they have a list, like a survey or a questionnaire that they give
Yeah.
you before the audit begins, with all the questions and sections that they're going to ask you about. And you kind of pre-fill this out. And then when they arrive, they go through it piece by piece and, ask questions if they have any questions on how you have answered each of the sections. We always did good on the audits, really good. I think they score you like a color system, green, yellow, or red, to where, if you're in the green, you're all good to go. And they're also looking for, like I said earlier, capacity. Should their production levels rise, that this is a really big concern for them. They want to make sure you're able to rise with them.
Right. So here we are talking about the real world situation where, as you mentioned earlier in the conversation, that let's say if they are building the 42 airplanes and all of a sudden they want you to spike your hiring, and when it comes to people side of issues, they are always going to be unpredictable. So hiring is never going to go smooth. So what have you done in terms of doing any sort of damage control where they were expecting that you need to have 5 people overnight? But there is no way to do that, right? I mean, it's just not possible. So have you come across any of those situations? If you have, then what do you have done to mitigate them?
Well, the good thing about this business, and I know other businesses are not exactly set up like that. A lot of businesses, their only customer is Boeing, and that can be kind of problematic to put all the eggs in one basket, so to speak. This particular business that I was involved in, they had a lot of other types of business and customers they were doing business with, like medical field and industrial and consumer electronics and things like this. So there were an excess of other people doing similar type job functions that could be instantly moved over to add capacity should that situation arise. So that was kind of like a safety valve we had where we could move people over.
Interesting. That's a very interesting comment there. And typically, when I have seen such scenarios in my personal experience, and typically, if you are, let's say, working in the medical device space and then you have an aerospace customer as well, I don't know how stringent these aerospace customers are going to be. But in case of medical device, they probably would like you to have completely separate area. They would like you to have the people trained on their processes. And if you are going to move the resources between the divisions and between the functions, that needs to be documented. So are those requirements there in case of aerospace as well? Or are they fine if you have to move these resources internally to meet the spikes in your demand?
So the way it kind of worked in this company was every company has to certify to a certain ISO standard. And what we did is we certified the entire company to AS9100.
Okay.
With a lot of the standards are kind of overlapping, but the AS9100 has everything that the ISO has, but it has additional stuff. And so if you certify yourself to that level as AS9100, then it kind of automatically umbrellas some of the other specs that you might be certified to. So that's how they did it. They were certified. The entire company was certified to AS9100. Therefore, when things needed to be shifted around, people were already on that spec to begin with.
Interesting. So that's a great way of doing this. And I don't know how stringent the certification requirements are going to be in case of AS9100. But obviously, you need to have the skills and the expertise that are going to be required for this. So this is a great way of just certifying all of your people in case of aerospace and move them as you would like as you get the demand. So let's talk about some of the requirements of AS9100. I don't know if there are going to be any sort of the certifications requirement, the skills requirement, any requirements related to the facilities and how you maintain that. Do you want to talk about some of the key requirements that you have seen in case of your AS9100 that you have not seen with the other ISO standards?
Yeah, I don't remember too much about the differences between the two. That I know the AS is a little bit higher. It's got a little bit more to it. But yeah, it basically looks at your quality systems and it centers around work instructions. So each process has an instruction that the company has written around that process. And the AS audit centers around that. They monitor a process, they audit the process, and they see They follow by the work instruction. Is this person trained the way this document says they are trained? Is this person following the procedures that this document specifies? And then they're just looking to see if you actually do what you say you're going to do. So they have a saying, say what you do and do what you say. Yeah. So it all centers around these work instructions and how you worded them. And so a lot of time would be spent in getting just the right language and wording down in the work instructions so that they could be easily followed by the person and audited by the auditing agency.
Okay, so in your journey there in the aerospace industry, were there any sort of improvements that you brought in that you are super proud of?
Probably the most thing that I'm proud about is that over the years that I worked there, we always had about a crew of about 50 people working on this aerospace, and over the years the business doubled and then eventually tripled. Yeah. And we pretty much kept the crew to around 50. And so that is a testament to the power of lean manufacturing. That's what lean manufacturing is all about, is continually doing a little bit better each day, shaving those seconds off each day, getting better and better. And then that is your reward at the end, is you've eventually been able to do triple the amount of revenue with the exact same headcount.
So that seems like a magic there, right? I mean, see, you had the triple revenue with the same headcount. Sure, you did a lot of improvement. Do you have specific examples of what improvements are we talking about here? Are you talking about optimizing the schedule? Are you talking about optimizing the processes? Can you talk about a specific example where you had some significant productivity gain? Because here you are talking about meeting the demand of 3x revenue with the same input. Unless you are doing something extremely dramatic, even in case of lean, even if you are doing the continuous improvement, this is a very dramatic improvement. So do you have any specifics that you can share where that actually resulted into the marginal improvement in the process?
Nothing is like really amazing. That's the whole power of lean is if you shave off a few seconds per day or a few minutes per day or whatever, then eventually those things compound. It's like compound interest. When you're saving in your 401k, it compounds, and over time you get there. And it doesn't seem like you're doing it because it's very slow and incremental. But I would say all the things you mentioned, it's all of the above. There were projects that we did where we moved machines around to a more favorable configuration, closer to each other, made processes more logical, improved flows, looked at data to find areas where things were not flowing, and then made small changes to processes to cut out things that weren't necessary. Of course, this is all very hard too, because like I said, in aerospace, everything is really documented well and locked down. So it forces you to be really creative in what there's things that you're allowed to change and things that you are not allowed to change. And you really need to not worry so much about what you can't change and be more focused on what you can change. And so it's an all of the above approach where you're doing, changing your processes, changing your training so that your training can get faster and easier, and getting your employees to be more knowledgeable, getting them to make decisions for themselves so that things move faster, eliminating paperwork or combining things that are taking extra time. You just got to keep shaving down in every aspect, everything that you can find.
Okay, amazing, Mark. That's it for today. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts?
I would just say that a really powerful combo to getting a competitive advantage is the combination of lean and industry 4.0. Lean is really the most important attitude and way to approach manufacturing. Like I say, it's always looking at things and saying they can be better. This can be better. Every day, this can get better. And we need to find and make things better every single day. And now I'm involved in Industry 4.0, which I also think is a powerful multiplier. And this is automating a lot of the processes that have been manual and getting a lot of data together that can also be used to point you in the right direction for improvements, further improvements, and giving you insights that weren't necessarily available before.
Okay, amazing. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be when you are working with such demanding customers such as Boeing, the only way to survive there is going to be to stay ahead in the game, to be proactive in your communication and collaboration. On that note, Mark, I would like to thank you for your time. This has been a fascinating episode.
Thank you very much, Sam.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Mark, head over to zemelgo.com. It's XEMELGO.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Jennifer Heron, who discusses how 3D CAD models can improve cross-functional collaboration and design from consumers' perspective. Also, the interview with Mike Yost, who discusses the differences between performance management, production management, and asset management on the shop floor. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to get you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.